Narcissists are notorious for passing blame and avoiding any kind of accountability for even the tiniest mistakes. But what is it about making a mistake that is so unacceptable to a narcissist? Welcome to Looking Behind the Mirror, where we explore narcissism and take our lives back as we make sense out of nonsense. As a quick disclaimer, everything I say is based on my opinions and my personal experiences. I'm not a professional, and if you're really struggling, I encourage you to seek professional help. I am providing links below for you. Anyone that's had any experience with a narcissist has probably noticed that they take mistakes very, very seriously. They not only take their own mistakes seriously, so seriously that they refuse to acknowledge even the smallest of them, but they also take your mistakes very, very seriously. The simplest mistake can be treated as an egregious crime. If it wasn't so infuriating, it would actually be pretty funny how they can make such a huge deal out of your mistakes and blow them way out of proportion, while at the same time pretending that their mistakes never happened, were somebody else's fault, or are no big deal at all. You might, after an honest misunderstanding, buy chocolate ice cream for them when they wanted strawberry, and you will never be forgiven. For years afterwards, it will be an egregious crime against them that you committed knowingly, and you'll hear about it at the most random times for the rest of all eternity. While they can lie, cheat, steal, do all kinds of things that hurt other people, and it's as if these things never happened or were no big deal, or they were backed into a corner and had no choice. They can't take any accountability for their own mistakes, even really big mistakes so big that they're not even really mistakes anymore. And they expect you to take way too much accountability for just simple, honest mistakes. And even after these mistakes are made, if you try to criticize them, even in a nice way, even in a constructive way, you will be told that you are rude, thoughtless, that you don't understand what happened. You might even be yelled at, raged at, insulted. Every mistake you've ever made in your whole life will be brought up. However, they have every right to criticize every little thing that you do, and you better just sit and listen and take it and believe them and take them seriously, or else you don't know how to listen, or you're too arrogant to listen to feedback. It's really funny how narcissists can never see how hypocritical they're being, or maybe they just don't care. But there are huge double standards and this inability that they have to accept that maybe they make mistakes sometimes, just like every other human being. So why is this? What is it about narcissism that makes it impossible for a narcissist to accept that maybe they make mistakes sometimes? I think on the surface it might be kind of obvious that it's just a blow to the ego, and since they're all about themselves and they're all about their ego, it's a simple explanation. Anybody with an ego that big just doesn't want to admit to mistakes. But with pathological narcissists, it goes a little bit deeper than this. It really goes deep into the pathology of their self-centeredness and their false identity. We need to remember that narcissists have black and white thinking. To a narcissist, everything is on or off, black or white, good or bad. There is no gray area in their world. There's nothing that's a little this or a little that. Everything is either 100% good or complete trash, and that includes people, and that includes them. This black and white thinking makes them feel like even the slightest mistake, no matter how well they may be doing anything else, is an unforgivable crime that completely negates any good thing they've ever done. Any mistake means that they are complete garbage, complete trash, that they're not even worthy of walking the earth. This taps into their deep pathological shame, and it just reminds them of how badly they feel about themselves. It really just completely destroys this armor that they've put around themselves and these stories that they've told themselves about how perfect and infallible they are. To a narcissist, a mistake isn't just a mistake. a mistake is like a tiny glimpse into a much bigger picture. It's a tiny little sign that everything is complete garbage. So it's kind of like, I know this might sound like a really silly analogy, but it was the best I could come up with. Imagine that you live in a world where everybody has blue hair and everybody likes having blue hair, and having blue hair is normal. Any other color would be very, very strange and weird and pretty unacceptable. And let's say the narcissist, he has green hair, but he wants blue hair because everybody has blue hair, and having green hair is really weird and really unacceptable. So the narcissist paints his hair blue so that he can fit in with everybody else and feel like he's worthy of walking the earth, because for whatever reason, having the wrong color hair makes you a completely unworthy human being in this world. So the narcissist doesn't want anyone to know that he actually has green hair. But let's just say in this analogy, which I'm sorry is so silly, but let's say in this analogy, there's a tiny spot that the narcissist missed. There's a tiny spot of green hair, maybe back here, and somebody notices it. And the narcissist completely flips out, because the narcissist knows that that tiny little speck of green hair is actually the sign that all of the hair is green, that he's hiding a much bigger secret. And the person that maybe notices that little green speck and points it out won't understand why the narcissist is making such a big deal out of it. It's just a tiny little green dot. But this is really what's going on inside of the narcissist. That tiny little mistake, that tiny little green dot, is just a little glimpse into something much, much bigger, at least in the narcissist's imagination. The narcissist doesn't understand that everybody makes mistakes and that that's perfectly fine and that it's part of being human to make mistakes. The narcissist has this idea in their head that everybody else is going to notice that they're not this perfect, infallible human being that they pretend to be. And narcissists put this expectation on themselves. They cannot fathom being anything but absolutely perfect and flawless. They never really learned that it's okay to make mistakes, and that a human being can be good and maybe bad sometimes. A human being can learn to do better. And ironically, this is part of what makes them such difficult and what some people would say bad people, is their inability to recognize any of their faults. They're actually unable to ever improve themselves because they can't recognize all the awful things that they do and the ways that they live that actually make their own lives more difficult. They can't recognize any faults, so they can never grow, they can never become better. And all this is done in an attempt to convince themselves that they're already perfect. So it's a little ironic. One more analogy to help you visualize how important a tiny little mistake is to a narcissist is to imagine that the narcissist is like a balloon, and a mistake would be like a tiny little piece of that balloon that's, part of the part that's holding the air in. What happens if you take just a tiny little piece of the balloon off of the balloon? The whole thing pops, the whole thing falls apart. And that's what a little tiny mistake is to a narcissist. It might be just one tiny little dot on the surface of this whole big giant balloon, but the narcissist's facade and false identity is really just full of hot air. That's really all there is to them. Their ego, their identity really is as fragile as a balloon, and that's why something as small as a tiny mistake can make them feel like their whole world is imploding on them. This construct that they built and this story that they are constantly trying to convince themselves of is so fragile that the tiniest mistake can knock it all to pieces. And another much more simple explanation for this is possibly the way that they were raised. Narcissists can become narcissists for all kinds of different reasons, but many of them learned from their primary caregivers that mistakes were absolutely unforgivable and unacceptable. And many of them learned this from a very, very young age. So that's a much simpler explanation as to why narcissists can't accept making any mistakes at all, because they were just raised to believe that the tiniest mistakes would be severely punished, that the tiniest mistakes would suddenly eradicate all of their safety, everything that they depend on to live, really. Imagine a very, very young child that relies for their very life on their primary caregivers, feeling as if they might be abandoned, they might be left on their own, or they might be severely punished if they make even the tiniest mistake. And to be raised that way as a very young child, I'm sure, makes it very difficult later in life to accept that mistakes really are okay. It really is okay not to be perfect. And I think what's interesting about this is that narcissists seem to have grown into adults that not only avoid making mistakes in the eyes of others, as that very small child probably needed to avoid making mistakes that his or her caregivers would notice, but narcissists actually fool themselves into believing that they never make any mistakes. They are the ones that need to believe that. They are the ones that they need to fool. They are the ones that they need to tiptoe around. Just like that balloon I talked about earlier, even the smallest, slightest mistake can take all of their hard work, all of the constant energy they spend, constantly reassuring themselves that they are the only thing that matters, that they are important and relevant and powerful and in control of everything. All that work they do can just be popped like a balloon with the slightest acknowledgement or forced acknowledgement that they may experience of a tiny mistake. So it's kind of interesting how maybe this was internalized from when they were a young child, where a primary caregiver was probably teaching them consistently that mistakes were unacceptable, to the point where the narcissist as an adult now believes that on their own and has taken over the role that the primary caregiver once served of punishing themselves and believing themselves to be absolutely worthless pieces of trash if they make even the tiniest mistakes. And of course, as adults, they will project all of this onto you because this is all really painful and stressful. It's a lot. It's a lot to carry around this constant expectation of yourself to be flawless and perfect at all times, to have an excuse ready at all times for any tiny little mistake. It's a little easier if they can just blame everything on you. So they do that as well, and they project these expectations onto you. So they've not only taken over this role of primary caregiver to punish themselves for any tiny little mistake, but now they're also going to take over that role and punish you for any tiny little mistake. And it sure is a lot easier to pay attention to you and pay attention to every little thing you do wrong and focus on that, so that they can take the focus off of themselves, so that they can make themselves feel better by comparison, so that they can say, well, yeah, I might have done this and I might have done that, but she bought the wrong flavor of ice cream when I definitely told her I wanted strawberry. She can't even listen. She doesn't even care about people. And unfortunately, for a lot of us that get caught up in relationships with narcissists, if we spend too long with them, we can start to adopt this ourselves. We can start beating ourselves up and taking this role on ourselves and expecting perfection from ourselves, or just living in constant fear that we're going to make any tiny little mistake at any time, that maybe we've already made a mistake today that we don't even know about yet, but we're going to be punished for at some point. If we spend too much time in relationships with narcissists, this belief can become ingrained within us, and we might start to expect perfection out of ourselves. The difference between us and pathological narcissists, though, is that we can overcome these bad habits. We can learn to associate with people that love us even when we make mistakes. People that don't suddenly seem to despise us because we've heard them wrong, because we bought the wrong flavor of ice cream, or maybe we tracked some dirt in the house on accident. We can learn to forgive ourselves for mistakes and to stop fearing making tiny mistakes when we realize that we deserve to be around people that aren't looking for an excuse to punish us. And ironically, for a lot of us, the biggest mistake of our life might just be getting involved with a narcissist. But that's a mistake that we can learn from, and it's a mistake we can forgive ourselves for. If you're looking for a way to support my channel and you've been considering professional therapy, BetterHelp is offering 10% off of your first month of service if you sign up using the link below in my description. And if you sign up using the link below in my description, I will get a one-time commission, and that'll help me out, and it'll help you out as well if that's something that you've been thinking about doing. I hope this helps. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and comment below any ideas you have for me for future videos. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you like this video and would like to see more like it in the future. Until next time, thanks. Bye.